got to earn your liberation.
The little Gazas that have risen up on campuses across America, and the liberal college administrators and politicians who refuse to restore law and order and to protect other students. These little Gazas are disgusting cesspools of anti-Semitic hate, full of pro-Hamas sympathizers, fanatics, and freaks. The terrorist sympathizers in these little Gazas aren't peacefully protesting Israel's conduct of the war. They're violently and illegally demanding death for Israel, just like their ideological twins, the Ayatollahs in Iran.
Ayatollahs.
I'm curious, Diallo. I'm curious.
Little Gaza is so appropriate. I think they should
perfect.
They should embrace that little Gaza shit, because that's exactly what the fuck these motherfuckers want to do. They want to, because Gaza is an open air prison under surveillance, under repression, under resourced and over policed. So I think a lot of people all over the world who think, oh, that's something over there. No, y'all all live in little Gazas, and the only reason you don't recognize the chain is because you don't try to go far enough to put tension on that chain. But the moment you put tension on that chain in your own little Gaza, because we all live in little Gazas, and if we upset the status quo enough, we can get that same treatment. So whoever that motherfucking piece of shit, racist motherfucker, lying ass piece of shit was, whoever he was, I think he's onto something. The whole planet Gaza. The world is a ghetto. The world is a Gaza.
Speaking on to something, I think we've had some back and forths about the fascistic nature of both parties, and you see this thing's going on, the threatening of free speech, students at risk for protests, and Trump is not in office, Democrats are in office. So I wonder, some of the things that you said before about the Democrat is not a fascist or fascistic party.
No, that's not fascism. I'm sorry. Listen to me. Fascism started in the early 1900s. State repression goes back as much older than fascism. So fascism is a very particular manifestation and way of structuring the state. Saying something isn't fascist doesn't mean it's just, it's non-violent, it's non-repressive. But go off. There ain't a hill I'm willing to die on for proper terminology and historical accuracy. But heads been getting split since long before Benito Mussolini and the fasci. But go off. And here's another thing. A lot of people think, oh, my state isn't fascist, therefore I'm free. My state isn't fascist, therefore there's no mass incarceration. No, but go off, like I said.
Okay. Just making sure you're still there.
No, because listen, you can have, without the hyper-nationalism, without worship and idealization of the state, without the fusion of multinational corporations before, because the fusion of multinational corporations and state power, or the capture of the state by private interest, you can, heads being split, monarchs were splitting heads of people for bread riots and shits of that nature. But like I said,
so basically the treatment of Palestinian or Palestine solidarity movement is not an indicator of fascism. That's this country's, I guess, bread and butter. Is more so what you're saying. One party is more fascistic and the other one is just rooted to the same type of injustices.
One party articulates hyper nationalism, just the characteristics that we associate with fascism, and the other party has characteristics we associate with liberalism and even what some call egalitarianism. But they both arrive at the same end. Again, heads have been busted, and there are places right now where there aren't protests and there aren't heads being busted, and the police aren't being hyper aggressive and jackbooted. But again, I think that in terms of calling everything whenever the state does anything is fascism, it's kind of like that to the left or the progressives. Hey, anytime the government does something, it's fascism. Is akin to me seeing that anytime when the right wingers or conservatives or reactionaries, anytime the government does something, it's communism. Oh, the government's coming in. They don't want us. They want to limit emissions. They want to tell me I can't drive my big SUV, and they want us all on electric cars. Anything the government does, that's communism. That's socialism. That's a right-wing reaction to anytime the government does anything, it's communism. And on our side, anytime the government does anything we don't like, it's fascism. I don't think it's the end of the world, but I do think that as fascism and the state moves towards actual fascism, but if you think you're already there, a lot of people are like, oh, throw your hands up. This is a fascist state. Throw your hands up. What are you going to do? Which a lot of times concluding that you have arrived or the state is formally and officially fascist. If you arrive at that conclusion, if you have cancer and you were like, well, I got terminal cancer, then and you stop taking the necessary means to address the cancer when it's still your prognosis isn't actually terminal yet, it'll sometimes accelerate your move towards terminal.
I don't know if that's fair to say that the same as, oh, I got cancer, I'm gonna throw my hands up and it's over. Oh, this is what I'm labeling fascism or fascistic, and I'm gonna throw my hands up. But Jared, I don't know.
As a wannabe George Jacksonist, I have to disagree. George Jackson called out that we were in fascism 50 years ago and certainly was not in encouraging a throw your hands up response. It was a throw your hands response. Okay. But you know, just yeah, that's
so there's one more clip of the, I guess, the law and order.
To me, this is run-of-the-mill capitalism. This is run-of-the-mill capitalism. And that's where we should be fighting, because it's the ultimate manifestation of and the ultimate conclusion of capitalism is fascism and imperialism and things. But we're still at capitalism. We don't need to go beyond capitalism. We should be fighting capitalism like our lives depend on it. But okay.
For the sake of not engaging more in a messy argument, let's play that clip real quick.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Gina,
this is so dangerous. Again, they're shooting rubber bullets, but I can tell you from doing stories about rubber bullets,
rubber bullets hurt. And you're shooting them at unarmed students and faculty and whoever else is out there. It's ridiculous. But that framing, and this is why, and we don't have to take a lot of time with it, but this is why I wanted us to look at that John McWhorter article. And I admit that I have very little good or positive to say about him. We've debated. He and Dyson debated me back in the day on Dyson's radio show, and the only bar that I will claim that I got off in that argument was that I said I called McWhorter Cotton Smith. I said you were an intellectual Cotton Smith, and meaning a snitch and a traitor, and but McWhorter wrote a piece recently in an opinion piece in the New York Times that is meant to, it's meant to justify and give cover to that little Gaza's framing. That so as he says here, I'm a Columbia professor. The protests on my campus are not justice. And John McWhorter, this is a guy that, again, this is somewhat exactly comes out of the Manhattan Institute back in the day. He's built a long career off of being a black spokesperson of white supremacy.
It's good money in that.
Very good money in that. And the long story short of what he does in this article, I don't know, we don't have to take too much time with it, but the long story short is that he equates these protests to violence. And he juxtaposes them to what he was saying were the more righteous but more peaceful and calm protests of anti-apartheid back in the day when he was at Rutgers. Yeah, go ahead.
He said he was trying to have a quiet reflection in his class, and they were making noise outside.
Well, he wanted to listen to composer John Cage. You're right, and that's very important. His most famous piece.
All this noise outside.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you expect him to conduct his class?
He said, "I couldn't see making them sit through and listen to the music as if it were background music, as if all the from the chants from river to the sea were the disturbing. He couldn't do it."
Genocide is equivalent to saying in integration,
right?
You know,
and I just want to be clear, like so we're clear.
The N-word is no genocide. That's an offensive slur.
I'm not making it up. I mean, he's saying here that what's happening there is a form of violence. These chants like that would have been condemned as a grave rupture of civilized exchange. Listen, to civilized exchange as people are being genocidally exterminated. But he's saying this is a form of violence because apparently he's claiming that there's some questions as to Israel's very right to exist in those chants. There's nothing specifically.
From the river to the sea means kill all Jewish people.
Yeah,
that's what he said.
So anyway, he goes through the circuitous point argument to say that this is not as righteous as the anti-South Africa apartheid protests. And we wouldn't tolerate this if it weren't for if these were folks chanting something about condemning Black Lives Matter or Black people or something like that. And I would say, but you don't see the difference there. That's the point. You're right. The idea is that the world is attempting to civilize by saying we don't want to live in a situation where we are condemning Black people and condemning but you want to and we would rightfully condemn if these were Nazis and white supremacists protesting in this way. But you're saying that ultimately these protesters are the violent threat, that not the colonization or the militarism that they are protesting. So that's, I mean, but to create this narrative that these are the violent protesters, that these are the little Gazas, is all meant to justify the violence we saw in that Instagram post and what may come. What may in fact come next if people continue and make their efforts even more sophisticated.
Well, Jared, you're wrong because he says this is how most people feel, and he right not to offend. In recreation, I record common and civilized opinions. I take none of this back in solidarity with the reasonable many, and most, and no automatic, no amount of rhetoric.
He's whack. He's just whack.
I hate when people punk out. If you're gonna be a bear, be a grizzly.
He doubled down though. He said he stand on business. He stand on what he said. But so I think it's I went through the article also, and then I guess I was trying to see. So he said something about how he likened this to, as you were saying, the protests against the apartheid struggle, and how it was not as violent. And again, I don't know, other than the chants that he's calling violent. But that hall, I think it was the Hamilton Hall that they've been taking over since back in the days. Like students have been taking that over, and all of the protests seeming to end with some type of reaction to the school. So in 1985, when anti-apartheid protest was going on at Hamilton Hall, that took for 21 days, the university ended up fully divesting in South Africa. So in that case, it did work, or that case, the actions that they was striving for did happen. And again, I'm not sure that he even covered that in his article, that it was successful because of their struggle, and there was chance, there was like occupying of a building. And so again,
No,
I'm
but
not
what
sure.
he doesn't say that, but his argument would be that, and what he's saying tacitly at least, is that yes, apartheid ended because that was the righteous thing that happened, and it was righteous. The righteousness of that struggle is proven in the fact that no South Africans on campus felt personally targeted, as opposed to those wanting to defend Palestinians who
How
are
does he know that?
again, this is my point.
This is, you know, he said on most
Because Tagichi's comment, what he's saying is apartheid, I can recognize, especially looking back from today, was unrighteous. Hamas is not the equivalent of Black South Africans suffering under apartheid. That's the point he's trying to distinguish, to draw out here. And to do it, he's trying to distinguish between the forms of protest and the righteousness, the right underlying or undergirding that protest. So it's a full reframing narrative nonsense. And even to suggest that he participated in any way in anti-apartheid struggle, I would question.
You don't know. You don't.
I
know.
don't know.
That was a little
Can I
wild.
tell you this, which is even more ironic, where he would try to talk about the worthiness and appropriateness of anti-South Africa versus anti-Zionist or anti-apartheid. South Africa's number one ally to the bitter, bloody end, white minority rule in South Africa's number one benefactor was Israel, up to and including giving South Africa a nuclear bomb and aiding and supporting minority ruled apartheid South Africa. Israel refused to support any of the boycotts. They, in fact, were illegally funneling weapons and resources to minority-ruled South Africa and Rhodesia. During the founding of Zionists, from Theodore Herzl on down, the Zionists have said one of the good things, if you aid us in establishing a Jewish state, we will be allies and further evidence of European imperialism. It was from day one an admirer of and an ally of European imperialism. So for him to say that South Africa, and you can't compare South Africa and apartheid in Palestine is just inaccurate in every respect, because they are literally were close allies, up to and including the Mossad giving intelligence and aiding in surveillance and capture of anti-apartheid activists and resistance cells.
So yeah.
So what in the entire fuck? How can this man even legitimately call himself an academic with being so inaccurate and so dishonest in such a large forum as the newspaper of record? What in the entire fuck?
Jared, no slight, but this kind of shows you it doesn't take intelligent people to become academics, professors, or none of that stuff. There's a lot of quotes in there that he said that is wild. He said the lusty chances from the river to the sea. Two students in
First of all, I don't need a PhD to prove I'm smart. I just happen to have one.
Yeah, you
like, I'm just playing. But you're right.
So he talked about the two students in his class who are Israeli and three others, to his knowledge, are American Jews, and he couldn't see himself making them sit through again that that.
I mean, if you have an anti-racist march, can you imagine how uncomfortable the neo-Nazis are if you have an anti-racist march?
I mean, he said that.
If you have a woman's liberation or a woman's empowerment march, can you imagine how uncomfortable the sexist and misogynist are? So when you stand against something, you have to be sensitive to the people, the ideologues who hold to that thing you're protesting against, of course.
He said if the protesters were instead chanting anti-black slogans, or even something like DEI has to die, to the same sound off tune that From the River to the Sea has been adapted to, they would have lasted roughly 5 minutes before masses of students shouted them down and drove them off campus. That dude is.
I don't even know if I wonder if that's true even, but his false equivalence, the attempted construction of a false equivalence is nonsense. By the way, I got to credit one of my offshoot nerd YouTube channels, Little Joel, for first putting me on to the fact that McWhorter even wrote this thing. So I didn't even know he had done this. So I got it, and I want to credit where I at least found it first.
And stop sending me articles behind the paywall.
Well, I got away from that paywall. I got some skills.
I didn't know. I forgot. It wasn't. And anytime you can, with New York Times and stuff like that, I can always get them through the university. So that's one of the few.
Right. I ain't living like that.
Well, my bad.
I'm
not
a crook like Geechee. I'm not an ivory tower establishment figure like you. I'm neither. So y'all be sending me shit behind paywall. It takes me half the day to read the shit.
Diallo, you would encourage getting around paywalls. Are you serious now?
Oh no, I listen to King's Son. What did King's Son say? Fuck a thug life. Niggas die being unlawful.
Thug life is stealing New York Times articles.
I'm still with Prodigy. As long as I'm alive, I'ma live illegal. And once I get on, I'ma put on my people. Yes.
So, not on the internet. Not in the fascist
I know it's hard to read.
Admit to crimes.
Even capitalists punish criminals.
I know it's hard to read John McWhorter, Jared. But do you think he was trying to be balancing sometime, like some of the part of the article?
No. Stop sending me shit. Screenshot that shit and send me the article.
No, what? So going back to what was even my first, when Glenn Ford and Bruce Dixon had initially launched Black Commentator, the first thing that I got to do for that publication was write an essay criticizing McWhorter's radio relationship with Dyson. And it allowed me to look into, for the first time back then, McWhorter's history and his academic, his intellectual lineage, so to speak. And it's all Manhattan. So it's Manhattan Institute being one of the more prominent white conservative think tanks. He is here to produce, again, a blacker face version of their politics. He's positioned, he's platformed to do it. So he's not trying to create a balance. He's creating a false equivalence. That's what he was doing.
I'm saying like one particular paragraph. He said, although I know many Jewish people will disagree with me, I don't think the Jew hatred is as much the reason for this sentiment as opposition to Zionism and the war on Gaza. I know some of the protesters, including a couple who were taken to jail last week, and I find it very hard to imagine that they are anti-Semitic. So there's a couple little lines like that in the article where he's like,
it's not a contradiction. It's an acknowledgement to the other wing of the ruling elite, which includes some of his more prominent, likely Jewish colleagues who he did probably know, and they were probably like, John, how dare you? So he had to throw this one line in. But again, it's not in defense of the protesters or their politics. It's to assure that he doesn't cut off too much of his benefactors, his stature, his class colleagues, his peers, when you read that article, it is funny to be, sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's personally painful, admittedly, to be lumped in with the McWhorter type academics. Because in reading that, my experience is most of our experiences, frankly, have nothing to do with what he's talking about. The styles of classes he's teaching, the few classes he teaches at the enormous salary that he gets, the focus of his class, the desire to be ensconced in that milieu, all of that. You can read it, you can hear it when he talks. So yeah, to me, when I read that line that you're talking about, it's him trying to cling, to not be fully pushed out of any of those spaces, even as he has to work for those who actually rule those spaces.
This is the last one. I got to read the funniest line of all. He says, the other night I watched a dad coming from the protest with his little girl, giving a good hard few final snaps on the drum he was carrying, nodding at her in crisp salute, percussioning his perspective into her little mind. This is not peaceful. So it's not a peaceful.
Yeah, and that's my point. I'm glad you called that out. He's saying, to your point, he's saying that even this father walking with his daughter is an act of violence. Mm. And then he concludes the whole piece by saying that all of this is a form of abuse. So not the genocide, not the suffering of people in Gaza, not the oppressed, not the people right even down the street from his New York City University, none of those people are suffering forms of abuse. Right. It's the father walking with his daughter away from a protest, propagandizing her, and others chanting in defense of those suffering genocide. That's the violence. So right.
There's also a point where he was like, he don't think that the war on Gaza is no longer constructive or even coherent. So at one point he thought it was constructive, but now it's no longer constructive. So maybe yeah, he was just throwing words at the page and hoping some of it connect.
Again, what does he mean by not constructive? Again, he's not saying it's unjust. He's not saying it's part of an imperial project. He's not saying it's genocide. He's just saying it's no longer constructive.
No, he said we need to define genocide. He said we haven't properly defined it yet, and that's why we have this confusion. So once we define genocide,
the genocide has been formally and legally defined.
Well, not according to John. John McWhorter know a little bit more than both of y'all. So
no, does he know more than the ICC?
I think so. He's at Columbia.
He damn sure does. That's
and
John
Israel
McWhorter.
Also, Israel being a signatory also has acknowledged and accepted the formal the Genocide Convention in the formal definition of genocide, if I'm not correct.
But Netanyahu don't care about that though.
I'm just saying that component where he says, "What is even genocide? What is
right?"
That's a goddamn lie. But this reminds me of a
bit much
a public talk I went to years ago, over 20 years ago, where Professor Mackey was talking about academic attack dogs, and he calls them people like McWhorter. McWhortless, you said? Who called him McWhortless? Calls him an academic attack dog. And the systems and institutions of white domination keep not just black, but women, LGBTQAI, migrant. They keep members who represent outgroups on the payroll. So when they have to come out and dismiss their own people with a level of legitimacy and representation, he called him. But what's ironic about that is when he gave his talk on academic attack dogs, Cornel West was also on that list.
I mean, ain't nobody arguing that. I don't think.
Okay, because y'all.
I mean, don't start
Well, but it's easy to do that. That makes sense because it's easy to make him the farthest left they will acknowledge, and then just to hold him up to be the political piñata.
So really quick again. So him trying to tie Columbia's protests this time to South Africa, where students have barricaded themselves there in the protests. But so I looked through the since '68 Vietnam. After a week of protests, police started cracking down on those protesters. Same type of shit happened. More than 700 people were arrested. One of the largest mass detentions in New York City, and at least 148 people was injured. Some were hit with nightsticks, dragged out, according to the student newspaper. But protesters result in that one, with the university cutting ties with the Pentagon Institute, doing research for the Vietnam War, and led to reforms favoring student activism. In '72, there was an anti-war protest in the same building. and the blockade several campuses ended with police riot gear stormed in and evicted the demonstrators. And then we just talked about in 1985, that was 21 days at the same Hamilton Hall. And even in 1992, that one-day blockade when the students was trying to block Hamilton Hall from demolishing the Audubon Theater, they didn't necessarily win. I think some of it still got kind of demolished, and it was able to keep a few. But it's showing countless times of these particular students, and I'm pretty sure students around the country, where these demonstrations are actually forcing the hand of some of these universities because of, I guess, their reaction. So if Columbia already said that divestment is off the table, then it probably would make sense for the students to up the ante and other people to get involved to where shit might look different.
You got to earn your liberation.